My name is Rachel Novak, and I'm 31 years old. Would you believe me if I told you that my own brother tried to have me removed from his rehearsal dinner because he was embarrassed that I fix cars for a living? Not just any cars. I'll get to that part. But yes, that's exactly what happened last October. And by the end of that night, everything he thought he'd built came crashing down in front of the people he was most desperate to impress. My brother Daniel had always been the smart one. That was just the family gospel, delivered regularly and without apology. He went to Northwestern on a partial scholarship, got his MBA, landed a job at a Chicago consulting firm, and spent the next 6 years carefully constructing an identity as far from our Pittsburgh roots as possible. I was the other one, the one who, instead of college, had enrolled in an automotive technology program at the community college 2 blocks from where we grew up. I want to be clear about something before I go further, because it matters. Please take a second to hit like and subscribe if you're finding this story worth your time. And I'm curious, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments, I read every single one. Now, back to Pittsburgh and the Novak family, and the particular kind of shame that can grow quietly inside a person for years before it finally has nowhere left to go. 3 days before Daniel's rehearsal dinner, he called me while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk. He assumed, I'm sure, that I was wiping grease off my hands in some garage bay. That assumption was one of many things he'd gotten wrong about me for a very long time. Rachel, he said, and I could already hear the careful tone he used when he wanted something uncomfortable, about Saturday night. What about it? So Vanessa's family is going to be there. Her father, specifically, Edward Calloway. He paused. He's kind of a big deal in the business world. Industrial manufacturing, commercial real estate. You know the type? I did not say what I was thinking. I waited. I just think, Daniel continued, when people ask what you do, it might be easier to say you work in the automotive industry, like consulting or something. You know how people get. The warmth drained right out of me. You want me to lie about what I do. Not lie. Just frame it differently. You do deal with automotive businesses, right? That's not completely untrue. Daniel, I own an automotive business. A repair shop, Rachel. And there it was. The way he said it, repair shop, like it was something mildly unfortunate, like a skin condition you didn't want to mention at dinner. Right, I said. Too tired to fight about it 3 days before his wedding weekend. I'll figure out what to say. After I hung up, I sat for a long moment looking at the contracts on my monitor. We had just finalized a fleet maintenance agreement with a regional freight company. 48 vehicles, 2-year contract. Novak Automotive Group had service centers in 4 locations across western Pennsylvania and northern Ohio. We employed 63 people, but for my brother, I would always be the sister who didn't go to college, the one who chose a trade. I should have known then exactly how Saturday night was going to go. I arrived at the Calloway estate in Fox Chapel, Vanessa's family home, a sprawling brick colonial setback from the road behind an iron gate, right on time. Daniel greeted me at the door with that look he'd been perfecting since our mother's birthday dinner 3 years ago. The one that said, "Please just be normal tonight," while his eyes swept over my outfit as if checking for visible damage. "You look nice," he said, which meant he'd expected worse. "Thank you, Daniel." The house was full of Vanessa's people. Her father's business associates, her parents' friends, a collection of sharp-dressed men and women who all seemed to know each other from some club or board or charitable foundation I'd never heard of. Daniel moved through them like he'd been practicing, laughing at the right moments, referencing things in a tone that implied deep familiarity. He introduced me the same way each time. "This is my sister Rachel. She's in the automotive sector." Automotive sector. Like I was a trade publication. Like I manufactured parts in some anonymous factory somewhere. Edward Calloway entered the room around 7 o'clock. He was a big man in his 60s with a handshake that meant business, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from not needing to prove anything to anyone. Daniel nearly vibrated with anxiety when Edward started making his way toward us. "Rachel," Edward said after Daniel made the introduction, and he held my hand a second longer than a standard greeting. Novak. Why do I know that name? Oh, Rachel works in auto repair, Daniel said quickly. Local stuff. Nothing to Novak Automotive. Edward was still looking at me, nodded. Daniel. You're out of Pittsburgh. The table went quiet around us. Daniel's smile became fixed. That's right, I said. You submitted a proposal for our Lakewood facility last spring. He tilted his head. Fleet overhaul. Preventive maintenance program for the whole distribution line. Daniel's girlfriend, now fiancée, Vanessa, appeared at his elbow. She looked between her father and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I did submit that proposal, I said. Your operations manager went with someone local to Cleveland in the end. Edward nodded slowly. I remember being frustrated about that, actually. He glanced at my brother. You never told me your sister ran Novak Automotive. She doesn't exactly run, Daniel started. She owns it, Aunt Patricia said from across the room, and every head turned toward her. My father's sister, who had driven 2 hours from Allentown and who had zero patience for pretense. She smiled pleasantly. She's owned it for 6 years. The silence that followed was the kind that has texture. Daniel's jaw tightened. Vanessa's father was looking at me with the focused, recalibrating attention of a man who takes business seriously, and had just realized he'd been given the wrong information. Is that right? Edward said. And it wasn't quite a question. It is, I said. Daniel stepped forward and his voice had shifted into something I recognized. The careful, slightly condescending tone he used when he felt a narrative slipping away from him. Rachel has a few locations, yes. Small operations. It's a solid little business. He said little the way you describe a child's lemonade stand. But she's being modest. She mostly does oil changes and brake jobs, keeps herself busy. He glanced at me with a tight smile. Right? Everyone was looking at me. I felt the moment like a crossroads. I heard Aunt Patricia draw a short breath. And I thought about my father. My father, Thomas Novak, had worked as a mechanic his entire life. He was the best diagnostic technician in our neighborhood, maybe in the county, and he knew it without needing anyone to tell him. When I was 8 years old, I handed him wrenches and he explained to me why every system in an engine matters, why attention to detail is a form of respect. He died of a heart attack when I was 22, still paying off the mortgage on the small house where we'd both grown up. He left behind 2 things: a shop manual collection that took up an entire wall, and a request he made to me 2 weeks before he died, when we both knew what was coming. Your brother's getting his MBA, he told me, his voice careful. He's going to need someone watching out for him, not just in the ways he expects. He squeezed my hand. Make sure he doesn't forget where he came from, Rach. Promise me. I had promised. For 6 years I had kept that promise in a way my father hadn't specifically requested, but would have, I believed, understood. When Daniel's consulting firm restructured 18 months after he joined, and he faced a gap between his severance and his next position, I had quietly arranged a consulting contract through my business that gave him income for 4 months. He thought it came through a friend of a mutual colleague. It did not. When Daniel and Vanessa got engaged and he confided, with great embarrassment, that he was short on the deposit for the venue they wanted, I had moved money through our family's attorney in a way that reached him as a gift from a family trust account. There was no trust account. There was just me, working 6 days a week, taking the contracts no one else wanted, building something real while he built something impressive. He did not know any of this. He had never asked, and now he was standing in his fiancée's family home, telling Edward Calloway that his sister did oil changes and brake jobs. I set down my drink. Actually, I said, let me make sure I'm representing this accurately since Edward and I have done business before. I turned to face the room properly. Novak Automotive Group operates 4 full-service centers across western Pennsylvania and northern Ohio. We specialize in commercial fleet maintenance and heavy vehicle service. We currently hold maintenance contracts with 11 regional businesses covering just under 400 commercial vehicles. I paused. Last year, our revenue was a little over $8 million. The room processed this information in stages. One of Edward's associates let out a low sound, not quite a whistle but close. Daniel laughed. The laugh was too loud and it was wrong in every way. Rachel, come on. You don't need to. Prove it? I asked quietly. His face reddened. 8 million, Edward said, and he sounded genuinely interested now. And you run the operations yourself? I do. I have a general manager at each location, but I handle contracts, business development, and major vendor relationships directly. Vanessa looked at her fiancé. Something moved across her face. Not anger. Not quite. More like recalculation. Daniel stepped toward me, and his voice had dropped to something that was supposed to be private but wasn't, not in that room. You're doing this on purpose. Doing what? Showing off. Making me look bad in front of her family. This is my weekend, Rachel. I'm answering a question someone asked me about my work. You couldn't just say you work in automotive services? You couldn't let it go? These people run billion-dollar companies. They don't need to hear about your garages. Your garages, Aunt Patricia said clearly from across the room. And a few people looked at her. She owns them, Daniel. They belong to her. Nobody asked you, Patricia. Actually, said one of Vanessa's uncles. A man named Gerald who had been quiet until now. I think a few of us did ask. I asked what she did for work when you introduced us, and you said she was in the automotive sector. That was a strange way to describe owning a company. Daniel turned on me, and 6 years of careful resentment came with him. You know what your problem is? You have always done this. You have always made me feel like I'm supposed to apologize for my success. I went to Northwestern. I got my MBA. I built a real career. And every time I'm around you, you make it about the garage, about Dad, about Pittsburgh. I don't make it about anything, I said. You're the one who told me to lie about what I do. I asked you to be discreet. You asked me to pretend I wasn't myself. Silence. I reached into my bag. I had come prepared, not because I had planned for the evening to go this way, but because I had received a phone call the previous Wednesday from our family's attorney about a matter that needed resolution, and I had brought the relevant documents with me intending to find a quiet moment to discuss them with Daniel privately. Now, in this room, with his future father-in-law watching and Aunt Patricia standing by the window with her arms folded, I understood that the quiet moment was never going to come. I placed 2 envelopes on the sideboard. What is that? Daniel asked. Things you should know about, I said. When you're ready. He reached for them immediately. Pride makes people grab at things. The first envelope held documentation from our attorney regarding the consulting arrangement from 3 years ago. 4 months of payments, detailed, totaling just under $22,000. I had authorized the attorney to disclose the source. Daniel pulled the pages out. He read the first line. He went very still. This isn't, he started. It's from me, I said. The consulting contract when your firm restructured. I arranged it. I thought you knew and were choosing not to say anything. You didn't know. He looked up at me. Something complicated moved through his expression. The second envelope, Aunt Patricia said softly, because she already knew about that one too. Daniel's hand wasn't entirely steady as he opened it. The document inside was a letter from the family attorney with a disbursement record attached. 14 months of deposits, each one labeled in the attorney's careful notation. Gift, per R. Novak, from operating account, Novak Automotive Group. The venue deposit. The engagement ring which Daniel had been agonized about affording. 2 months of rent when he and Vanessa first moved into their apartment, and the timing was bad. $31,000 total. I don't understand, Daniel said. His voice had gone strange. This is from you. Yes. All of this. Yes. He looked at the pages for a long time. Edward Calloway was quiet. Vanessa had moved to stand near her father. The other guests had stopped pretending not to listen. Why? Daniel asked finally, and underneath the word I could hear something younger. Something that remembered our father's shop and the small house and the way we used to sit on the front steps in summer. Why didn't you just tell me? Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me something. I wanted you to have what you needed. He set the papers down. When he looked up at me, I could see that his jaw was working. So this whole time, you were. He stopped. Started again. And I told you to tell people you work in automotive consulting. Like you were embarrassing me. He pressed his mouth into a line. Like you were something to be managed. Yes. In front of Edward. Yes, the word hung there. I watched him understand it. The full weight of what he'd asked me to do, and what I'd quietly been doing for him for years while he did it. Edward Calloway picked up his drink. He did not look away from me when he spoke to his daughter's fiancé, Daniel. I've been in business for 35 years. The people I've respected most in that time are the ones who built something real and didn't need you to validate it. He set his glass down. Your sister built something real. You should have been the one telling me about it. Daniel didn't answer. Vanessa slipped her hand into mine, which I had not expected. She was looking at her fiancé with an expression that was gentle and clear at the same time. We're going to need to talk tonight, she said to him. Not as an accusation, as a fact. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. Rachel. Daniel's voice stopped me at the threshold. It didn't sound like his MBA voice or his networking voice or his let's just manage this situation voice. It sounded the way he'd sounded when he called me the morning after our father died, sitting in his dorm room in Evanston with no idea what to do next. I'm sorry. I know. I mean it. I know you do. I looked at him. Figure out what you actually believe about the work I do. Not what you think sounds better at a dinner party, what you actually believe. I pulled on my coat. Call me when you know the answer. I said goodnight to Aunt Patricia, shook Edward Calloway's hand. He held it firmly and long and said, Monday, I'll call your office. And I walked out into the October night. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes. Through the lit windows of the house, I could see movement, silhouettes, the shapes of a conversation that was going to last well past midnight. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Patricia. Your dad is doing something very satisfying right now, wherever he is. I had to laugh at that. The following week was quiet in the way that follows a storm. I went into my Cranberry Township location Monday morning and worked a full day. Edward Calloway called at 2 in the afternoon, as promised. We talked for 40 minutes about his Lakewood facility, and 2 others he was considering restructuring maintenance contracts for. He was direct and specific, the way serious people are, and at the end of the conversation he said, I want to understand why my operations manager passed on your proposal in the spring. I'm going to ask him. I suspect I'm not going to like the answer. I said, whatever the reason was, I'm glad we're talking now. He said, so am I. On Tuesday, Vanessa called me. She apologized for things she did not actually need to apologize for. She hadn't known, she told me, how Daniel spoke about my work or what he'd asked me to say. He told me you were a mechanic, she said. I thought he meant like, just a mechanic. I didn't ask more questions than that. I should have? You don't need to carry that, I told her. I like you, she said, which came out sounding honest and slightly surprised. I want to actually know you. Can we have lunch sometime? We did have lunch. She's sharp and genuinely funny, and she loves my brother in a way that makes me think he might actually deserve it, or might grow into deserving it. Both are possible. Daniel called me Thursday. He had clearly been composing the call for several days. He talked for a while about our father and about the years after his death and about the story he had told himself, that he was honoring our father by succeeding in the world our father never got access to, that the distance he put between himself and Pittsburgh and trades and everything that smelled like a garage was a kind of tribute. He talked until he ran out of talking, and then he was quiet. I think Dad would see it differently, I said. I know he would. A long pause. I've been thinking about that consulting contract, and the venue deposit. All of it. Rachel, I've been an idiot. You've been afraid, I said. That's a little different. Same result, though. Same result, though agreed. He asked me if we could start over. Not pretend the years didn't happen, but start from where we actually were instead of the roles we'd each been playing. I said yes, I meant it. 4 months after that rehearsal dinner, Novak Automotive Group signed a maintenance contract with Callaway Industrial for 3 facilities, 112 vehicles, 4-year term. My general manager in Cranberry Township called it our biggest single contract in company history. He wasn't wrong. Daniel was the first person I called. Not to say I told you so. I didn't want that, had never wanted it. I called because he was my brother, and our father was somewhere being quietly pleased, and I wanted to share something good with someone who understood what it had cost to build it. He didn't say anything for a moment when I told him. Then he said, "Dad always said you were the one who really understood engines. I thought he was just being nice to you." He was being accurate, I said. That was usually the same thing with him. I still think about what it took to walk into that room as myself instead of the version of me my brother found manageable. I think about the years of showing up to family events and watching Daniel carefully redirect conversations away from anything that might lead back to Novak Automotive, to tools, to the fact that I had built something with my hands. I let it happen for a long time. I told myself it was keeping the peace. But keeping the peace I finally understood, and letting someone erase you are not the same thing. The work I do has dignity. The people who work for me, the technicians who can diagnose a diesel engine by sound, the service writers who know every fleet manager in the region by name, they have dignity. My father had dignity, with his cracked knuckles and his shop manuals and his 3 jobs and his love for us, that never once asked us to be ashamed of what we were. I am not ashamed of what I am. I never should have let a single dinner party make me act otherwise, even for a moment. Daniel and Vanessa got married in May. He asked me to give a toast, which I had not expected. I kept it short. I said that I had watched my brother spend a long time running away from where he started, and that the best thing that ever happened to him was being forced to stop running and look around. I said Vanessa was the reason he stopped, and I said that I hoped he would spend the rest of his marriage doing what he'd finally started doing in October, introducing himself and the people he loves as exactly who they are. He cried a little. He'll deny it if you ask him. I'm telling you this because if you've ever been the person in your family who got quietly minimized, whose work got called a hobby, whose success got soft-pedaled, who got asked to make yourself smaller so someone else could seem bigger, you already know exactly how it feels to stand in that hallway and decide whether to keep going or finally turn around. Turning around is not cruel, it is honest. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to keep pretending, so they finally have to see what's actually in front of them. If that hit something for you, please leave me a comment. I want to hear your story. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a moment like this, or if you're still waiting for the courage to do it, let me know below. Hit like if this was worth your time, and I'll see you in the next one.